Few of us could have predicted how worldwide events of the last few years would accelerate digital transformation. Painful as much of it was, productivity skyrocketed as we found new ways to serve customers. You remember these heroic tales featuring incredible feats of stretching and bending and reaching towards ever higher customer satisfaction scores. Many of these pulled off using all new tools in all new ways, really that few of us understood. We set entirely new, unsustainable standards that could not be duplicated without further personal sacrifice. But pulling together to figure out how to succeed in this new normal, there's nothing wrong with that until we begin to realize how costly it can get. And we are, right? The great resignation, quiet quitting. Even if you're tired of the media's constant drumbeat, these are real problems backed by data telling us that the customer experience cannot be sacrificed on the altar of employee experience. Now, there are meaningful links between these functions that are too often overlooked. It's a relationship with more depth than you might think. You see, the call to equalize employee and customer experiences, well, it should sound familiar. It's the very first priority featured in Worldwide Technology's year-end report, Digital Workspace Priorities for 2023. Now, we covered all 5 priorities on a previous Tech 37, the significance of automation, creating a destination workplace, interoperability and transparency, plus fostering a sense of community. They're all powerful. They're all important. But today we are going to examine the often overlooked nuance found within Priority 1, Equalize employee and customer experiences. Because there's nothing more important to your business right now. Welcome to Tech 37, your home for technology, education, and collaboration. My name is Rob Boyd. Well, all right, guys, welcome to Tech 37. David, very familiar face. Well, actually, Charlie, you're familiar as well. You guys always around digital experience. This one, of course, being a deep dive in kind of the nuance of Priority 1. But first, let's introduce for anybody that's not familiar with you. Charlie, I'll start with you. Who are you? What do you do?
My name is Charlie Lawhorn. I'm the Chief Digital Advisor at Worldwide, and my team gets pulled into pretty much everything around digital experiences and the technologies that support them. So this is a pretty familiar topic. Thanks for having me.
And it feels like most of our world is revolving around various digital experiences these days. It's the real experiences I'm always trying to figure out how to get more of. David, always good to have you on. You're a fount of knowledge. But for anybody who's not familiar with you, what do you do? And why are you here?
I'm at WWT. I'm the distinguished solution architect over Digital Workspace. So similarly to Charlie, I concentrate on basically all the technologies and capabilities that if a person touches it or uses it to perform their work, it probably is underneath that umbrella of Digital Workspace for us.
Yeah, got it. Well, you guys are perfect for this. And I really wanted to cover some of the nuance because it does appear, especially since we aired the previous episode, that we did need to spend more time, especially on this one. The very first priority, there's a reason you guys probably put this first because I know that you argue back and forth in a polite manner about how you do these things. But this notion, David, I'll start with you because you had started with this on the previous, but I like where you're going. Set us up in terms of what does it mean to equalize employee experience and customer experience?
Well, for a lot of organizations, it's very intuitive. It's already become very ingrained in them that the importance of the customer experience in their business, that if people have a good customer experience, they're more likely to re-engage with the business, and it directly drives to revenue and other areas associated to it. But what also has to happen is an understanding that the employee's experience can be just as important, because just like technology frustration or a cumbersome employee experience very quickly turns into frustration on the customer side as well. There's always one of the classic examples is you call up and the first thing that the person answering the other end of the line says is, please hold on, my system's slow, right? Or you walk over and you're trying to get a new reservation at the airport or something else along those lines. And it's that same kind of slowness on that side or poor experience there turns into frustration on your side. But it can even be worse. It could be at a clinical session or somewhere else where needing that, that constant friction in the employee experience generates unnecessary headaches and heartaches, both for the employee for the business, the organization, and ultimately for the customers themselves.
Well, so, and Charlie, I encourage you to jump in at any time, but I'm going to jump in faster on this one. Just as if I understood correctly, because I think this is where some of that nuance becomes interesting, which is, I think it's intuitive that a good employee experience can translate, happy employees translate into happy customers. Is the reverse hold true? What's the linkage on these things, and do they need to be so distinct? Can they be combined into one discipline? Charlie, you're nodding your hand, but I'll let you jump in here, and then we'll let David's never short of something to say, so we'll let him come back on that one.
I think.
But what do you think, Charlie? Are they linked in that manner?
They're directly connected. I think you can level up one side a little bit, but the other side has to catch up. Like you can't keep improving customer experience without leveling up the associate or employee experience. And you can't have an amazing employee experience with a horrendous customer experience. Like they level each other up. And one of the trends that we saw through COVID was there was a huge swing, like a pendulum, right? A real big swing towards customer experience. Business continuity had to happen. We saw it in healthcare. For the first time, you had drive-throughs offering shots or tests. We saw it in retail and restaurant where everybody had a DoorDash and Uber Eats and pick a delivery platform. They leveled up the customer experience, but what we then saw after that a few months later is burnout of associates. I mean, in healthcare, it's still happening. Keeping up with nurses and retention is huge. It's happening in retail and restaurants. Keeping up with hourly wages increasing, and the labor force shying away because of the stress load. So what you're seeing is a leveling up of the employee experience now to catch up with all that work that we did on the customer experience side. So yes, long answer to a short question, they're directly connected.
Well, and it feels like, so what you're saying, there's been an over rotation as we needed to react quickly. And it feels like, correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like that's okay in the short term. There's nothing better than a bunch of people rallying together to say, how do we do this? How do we accomplish it? Let's put all hands on deck. Let's do it. But it feels like what you guys are saying, and David, I'll go to you on this. Are you saying that that's fine for the short run, but you can't run a business like that? It's gonna burn out, as he said, and suffer. Other things are gonna suffer. Yeah.
And the pendulum is not is a good kind of analogy for it, but it's also almost like a weight, right? Or an anchor. If you have a poor employee experience, no matter how much wind in the sails you put in the customer experience side, that will continue to create a drag on that ship kind of sailing, forward. And that's really what it comes down to. You have to then elevate the employee experience. Otherwise, it doesn't matter how much more resources or focus you put on customer experience, you're never going to get rid of that weight if you're not also delivering on a better employee experience, because unless you're 100% self-service, or some kind of craziness that isn't even imaginable, unless it's 1,000 robots and only customers, right? Even when you look at it from the perspective of a vending machine, at some point or another, if you can't get, your employees can't put stuff in the vending machine, it doesn't make any difference. So go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, am I correct in saying that and this is maybe it's my worldview outlook, but in a previous time I had spent time building and overseeing kind of interfaces between systems that were necessary for running a hotel operation. But it struck me that, all these little interfaces are designed to communicate between disparate machines. And it feels like in the pandemic, as we threw technology at problems, we rapidly increased our pace of digital transformation, but it was not done with the respect for the underlying platform and processes we may have had in place or need to put in place. And so you're kind of sacrificing your people, which is, again, people become that expensive interface between systems when you're trying to make things work. Your call center, talking to some of your call center experts for another project, we're talking about AI and different things, and you guys probably are very familiar with this, but it was new to me. But they said whenever an agent is telling you, it's like the biggest lie call center agents say is, hold on, my system is running slow. And it's more about the interface that they're doing between multiple things that is slowly pulling data. It doesn't all instantly pop like they need it to, perhaps. And so they're buying time through claiming a slow system as they get it together. And I'm just always so happy to have a human on the phone. I don't care if they have to wait a few minutes, but because my biggest frustration is, but anyway, that's a different show. What are the risks of not prioritizing this? Because you guys have this as the first priority on a list of 5 priorities for 2023. So what is the danger? Charlie, start with you, but both you guys riff on this one. What is the danger of not prioritizing this versus maybe other projects? What's important about it?
I touched on a moment ago the labor and the retention challenges that people are having, right? I think that's one of the biggest risks is just being able to both find and retain talented people and quality resources. It's been the biggest challenge across industries, and a lot of that is the burnout that I mentioned or the stresses. But there's a whole other aspect too. I mean, when everybody went home and worked from home, there are some conveniences that we picked up in being home for a year or 2 years, or maybe still for some of our listeners. And, if the workplace doesn't understand that some of those expectations that we have as people that we gained out of those conveniences being at home, if we can't extend those into the workplace in some ways, Rob, we talked about it in a different discussion, but like, I'm Charlie all day long. And just because I'm at work or badged in, or just because I badged out and now I'm at home, I still want a good quality experience throughout my day. And so my behaviors and my expectations are up-leveled a bit after COVID in some ways. And so because of that, companies have quite a bit of work to do to catch up and try and make offices simple and seamless and frictionless as best as they can, and to do the same thing with contact centers or customer engagements with their associates. We all picked up new habits. It was 2 years. It went by like that for some, and it went by for a really long time for others. But in those 2 years, we all picked up new behaviors, and I think that's what we're all juggling with.
David?
Well, I mean, one, Charlie's 1,000% right. There's real costs associated with employee retention, acquiring, attracting talent, especially in a tight labor market like what we have. And, just the loss, the brain drain, the loss of institutional information and all that can cripple an organization, right? Can really cause it to struggle unnecessarily. But even outside of that, a cumbersome experience or a high friction experience is in itself an inefficient experience as well. So even just from a productivity standpoint, right? If you're having a lot of technology frustration, or even outside of technology, just process frustration, things that could be automated and removed or removed from you, and other areas that people just aren't taking advantage of, then you're going to be less efficient, right? You're going to run out of steam earlier during the day. You're going to have more conflict and other stuff, but you're just going to get less done. Is just the truth of it, right? If you got to reboot your machine 6 times a day, that's a lot of time you can't get anything accomplished. So really kind of going through it and identifying those points of friction and having some level of concentration and recognition that there's different workflows for different groups of employees in different areas, and trying to uplift all of that just makes your whole environment more productive, allows you to do more with the people that you have.
It's funny because I feel like, and this is not exactly where I want to go yet, but just to acknowledge the fact that I feel like I would hope all of us have some level of self-awareness where we are. I know that I go through this thing where I've kind of figured, well, how am I most efficient? Whether it be time of day or how I like to work or how I like to communicate. And do I want to do something in a group, or is this a solid thinking thing? And these things have been changing a lot as we've all shifted around. But when I think about this from a leadership or even a management perspective, on one hand, I feel like, wow, we're at the beginning of a whole new breed, I feel like, of managers. I'm sure you guys have heard this term. I used to think about, because we've been promoting, for those of us in the technology space, we've been promoting remote work for years. Video conferencing was the hot new technology that was just around the corner for years. And now all of a sudden it's all happened, without, and it's like, okay, it's here. You guys got what you wished for. But I feel like, this notion of line of sight managers that I used to call them, where they didn't believe you were working unless you were in their line of sight. That's been on the outs for a while, I think, but especially now. And so when it comes to leadership, not just personal management styles, but what is the right way to lead this type of change and this priority? You're saying that customer experience and employee experience are distinct functions. We're not just going to lump them together into experience, are we? Or Can the same person do those jobs, or is it something that needs to be distinct?
That's a great question. I think it depends. I think it depends on industry in some cases. I think there's some organizations where customer and associate experience are so intertwined that they can't easily be separated. Restaurant, hospitality, entertainment areas, sporting events, those types of things, right? Places that are very customer, even healthcare, right? I mean, places where customers and associates are directly line of sight, handshake away, those types of things. You've got to really think about the interaction of those experiences back and forth between the customer and the employee. There are other industries where you can separate them out. Manufacturing, right, is a great experiment where my employee experience in my plants and my facilities and my contact centers, maybe my contact center is about as close as I get to direct interaction with a customer. But as I move into plant world or field service work or things like that, I can really start to think about a customer experience separate from an employee experience. But I think those areas are shrinking. I think more and more, even field service workers do engage with a customer. I know in working with telcos or cable providers, now they text or send a message around when they're going to be there or if they're running late. That interaction with customers is becoming more and more close. And so
now I get upset when businesses don't do that. Yeah. Now, because
my dentist is
amazing. I know
amazing.
You could give me an update on something like this, and it's like, yeah.
It's crazy, Rob, but my dentist is a small firm, and I get amazing text messages, reminders, alerts. Big healthcare systems don't do that for patients going through cancer treatment and reminding them not to eat before treatment. And so the small companies have picked up these little lightweight, agile technologies. And the big guys and gals haven't done some of those things, and they have to catch up.
This is interesting because it is funny how technology has really liberated the smaller business, and we're seeing more and more tools for doing this into competing with the bigger established ones because of the ability to be flexible and nimble, because you don't have the infrastructure perhaps to have to try and keep up and still depreciating, to work on. And same way rural communities benefiting from high-end wireless and getting better bandwidth and speeds in these, not all rural areas, and certainly not in America, but you know what I mean in terms of because they're not having to deal with the cost of a pre-established infrastructure. But David, you were going to also comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think Charlie hit all the areas very, very clearly, because industries are drastically different. But as Charlie pointed out, that linkage between the employee and customer experiences is becoming tighter and tighter. And the other thing that we're also seeing is kind of the uplifting about who's in charge of each area. Like very often, like the CMO or chief marketing officer, will very often be the one that's in charge of customer experience holistically, right? And are looking at things like net promoter scores and other areas associated to it. But there's been very often on the employee experience side, it's been and other duty or responsibility for someone else. And we're seeing even that get up leveled as well. So even though sometimes we'll see a chief experience kind of officer role that is in charge of both employee and customer experience, and more of like the industries like Charlie was mentioning, like, more retail, more direct customer engagement areas. On other areas, we're starting to see an uplifting, into the HR and the CIO roles and other areas where employee experience is starting to get that same level of weight. And in a number of conversations we have with a number of customers, if it's not someone's primary duty and level of responsibility and uplifting that, and it's just and other duties for that person, then you get what you put into it, right? It needs that same level of sponsorship from the top down for it to actually make an impact within the organization. And that's really been what's key in the organizations that we've seen be more successful in starting to uplift this.
Hybrid work is here. It's there. It's everywhere. But for someone to be able to work from here or here, there has to be someone here, making sure everything is safe, secure, consistent. So go ahead, log in from here, dial in from here, sit in from here, assured that someone is here with a view of everywhere, ready to fix anything, anytime, anywhere, even here. That's because nobody, and I mean nobody, makes hybrid work better. Cisco, the bridge to possible.
Well, flipping to, we're talking about measurement in a second. You mentioned net promoter scores, but just on this, are you guys seeing clients look to one of their motivations being that they have to, that this is an opportunity for them to excel and perhaps attract the employee base that they need or want, and not to mention retain them, because it feels like, especially of course in knowledge work and the type of stuff I've done, which usually involves a screen and a good connection is about all I need. But it seems like it's very fluid. People can leave if a lot of the jobs I'm going to get are always behind a screen, and the physical location doesn't matter as much, and the face-to-face interaction. Well, suddenly that it seems like it makes it a bit easier for me to job hop, or even not. You mentioned quiet quitting, and I always think about people who are working multiple jobs and no one knows that they actually have 2 or 3 other jobs. What are you guys seeing in your experience? Yeah,
16 years ago. And change. One of the reasons why I took the call from the recruiter that I came to Worldwide was my level of frustration at a large technology service provider and their inability to allow me to do my expense reports in a way that didn't kill like 6 hours.
That one application could cause so much hatred.
Yes. So I can directly relate to a sense of technology frustration and process frustration of why do I have to print it out, then fax it, then print it again? Kind of model set. That might be saying how long ago that was. But that level of frustration was literally why I was willing to take that call from that recruiter at that time. Maybe it was.
But do you remember?
Event, but still,
because I think we went through the same thing. I worked for a large telecom that merged with another large telecom, and then people went to jail and it was dissolved. But but I remember back in that day being attracted to the big company because they gave me a laptop, maybe a phone, at least a pager. Again, to date myself. And I was excited because those felt like very professional things that I couldn't afford or wouldn't have a reason to even have on my own at that point in time. Whereas Charlie, what you mentioned in a previous comment, now it's flipped, and I don't think we're not going to draw employees in just because we use a certain model server or that anything else. We're all pretty equal, it feels like, on our access to that technology, but our expectations are higher.
Yes and no.
Okay. Please bring it on.
Choice is a discussion that we've had with Yvonne at Worldwide, end user compute specialist. And we were talking about companies that allow employee choice. Do you want to work on a PC or do you want to work on a Mac? Like just that type of a choice. I have some guys on my team that probably would have told me to get lost if I made that choice for them, because the last decade plus they've become experts and proficient in working with one of those operating systems or one of those devices. So we do see some advantage to those choice in devices. Whether or not I help outfit employees' home offices now is a big piece of this, so that they can remain competitive with a second monitor. As silly as that sounds, monitors used to be $1,000 each. Now they're what, $150, whatever, for a decent secondary monitor. So I think there's still, yeah, right, yeah, and unless you go crazy, but there's still some advantage there, but. Now it's more about frictionless experiences too. Like how we were joking in a different discussion about how simple it is to log in or not log in, or is single sign-on the end all be all experience? No, companies are starting to extract the application layers to where I just have one app layer. This sits across 5 or 6 different tools beneath it, so that I don't have to log in and out and learn how to use 5 or 6 different tools. So that level of experience is moving into software development for internal applications, internal processes, and just making it smooth and clean to where, why should I care if it's an SAP system, an Oracle system, an IBM system, pick your favorite flavor. I just need to log in and do my job. And so companies are getting better at trying to streamline those experiences too.
One of the things that we often tout about is like their nirvana in the employee experiences. We usually call it technology transparency. Like I don't think about what tools I used or what process I used. I just did my job. And with the extraction of the layers, like similar to what Charlie was saying, is it allows us to have a similar set of experience across devices and form factors and other things. So for a lot of organizations, it's really understanding the workflows of people there. So you're giving them the right kind of device for what they're trying to do, right? So that you have a lightweight tablet for maybe a clinician that's moving around everywhere, right? You have the a MacBook with the right number of processes and all that for someone that's in marketing and graphic design, right? Each one of these kind of tool sets that you're giving them the choice and the capability to give you that what to give them the capability that they need to perform their job as best they can. And that's one of those things that you talked about a little bit earlier. It used to be if you clocked in and were in the office, you were seen as productive, right? And we've seen some of the nanny software go out and other things that was, are you logged in? How long were you logged in or whatever. But what we're seeing for a lot of groups is they're starting to go, logged in or in office does not equate to productive. So what are those measurements of productivity and those KPIs and those other things that we need to measure that might be different for different people in the organization? And looking at that from that perspective, because, just because you're logged in doesn't mean what you're doing is being advantageous. And just because you're not logged in doesn't mean that you're stealing time from the organization. There's a sense of balance and capability that has to be there that might be different for different roles within the organization.
So that's a great segue into my next question that I really want to get your opinions on, which is how do we measure this kind of thing? Because I feel like in a perfect world, we have a baseline of where we are. We have a way to measure it going forward. We know if we're executing on certain specifics, but this feels like, and I feel like it's a common refrain that these are feely stuff. These are soft targets that are hard to put objective numbers by, but maybe I'm wrong and I want to be wrong. So David.
All right. So one of the things that we're seeing a big rise is DEX and DEM scores, right? Which are equate very much to net promoter scores people are very used to. But just giving something a number doesn't necessarily mean much, right? Like I can tell you your DEX score is a 6.7, but if I can't tell you how to get it to a 7, what levers you need to pull and all that, then it doesn't become very useful for you, right? It's just a number you got a grade, right? So what we're seeing is looking at those underlying kind of sense of capabilities and other things that kind of really drive what creates an employee experience. One of them, that we measure a lot is like employee sentiment. And, one way to do that obviously is the surveys and other stuff, which has been very traditional, rate my call afterwards, even, point surveys and things. But now we're also looking at tools similar to what people have been using on the consumer side to check sentiment around brand protection and all that. How are people mentioned? What is the sentiment of like a tweet about your brand or your business or reviews, et cetera? We're seeing that applied internally so that when people are internal employees are having conversations about, the latest, corporate update or the latest patch or technology or rollout or whatever the latest tool, they can track that sentiment there as well, which might give you a lot of insights that you might be blinded to otherwise, because you don't know what your blind spots are to when you're building out the survey to start off with. So you might miss a whole level of frustration or capability, how something was rolled out differently, maybe in one part of the country than from another. You may not be able to track or see that. So we're starting to see a lot more in the employee sentiment area. Other areas we're seeing a lot of places where you can quantify stuff is things around like connectivity, right? It makes a major component, especially with all the cloud services and other applications there. Security and security friction, right? Are these different things that are going on, changes in the environment, and what is the impact they're having on the overarching employee experience? Because you can have each one of these things. You could have your connectivity be perfectly within your SLA, your security perfectly within SLA, your applications performing perfectly within their SLAs. But the aggregate of the sense of experiences might be delayed or detrimental or causing friction for the employees themselves. And so really getting all the way out, looking at each one of those individual kind of layers and seeing what levers you can pull in each one of those that can incrementally improve the overarching employee experience is critical, as well as having a check to be able to say, hey, looking for that kind of Pareto efficient kind of model set did any one individual change in like network stack or the security stack or the application stack make the overall experience worse? So while you may have improved one for one group or team or portion of the organization, are you making it a detrimental experience difference to the rest? Right. So it allows you to kind of track that and get a holistic view and see how you're doing it on an aggregate level. Well, instead of everybody just saying, hey, I'm good. Each team is like, I'm good. Everybody's good, but our experiences are getting worse. How is that possible, right? So this really being able to kind of look at it holistically has been real key.
David covered a lot of the more classic models for measuring and analyzing and collecting data on, are my experiences impacting my workforce or my customers. There's some other examples that we can share that we've seen, real examples from the field. So we worked with a large retailer around a computer vision pilot. The computer vision pilot was to try and help figure out loss prevention, huge problem in retail in today's world. And
can you define computer vision though, real quick, just to make sure we don't lose anybody on that?
Yeah, using cameras and compute technologies at the store to monitor behaviors. Not your classic, closed circuit TV cameras in the corner, cameras that have AI models and things behind them that can look for
sensor. It's a sensor that provides unique data points that you could do something with. Okay.
Think of an example that we all understand. Most of us don't like are the speeding ticket cameras, right? They look to see, did a car go through that red light? How did it know the red light was there? Was the car entering it? Was it not? When was the light yellow? So that they can write you a speeding ticket. And they also use the computer vision to analyze your license plate. That's how they know who to send the ticket to. And so that's a great example, or horrible example, of computer vision, however you want to look at it. And yes, I've had one or two of those in my lifetime. So I'm very familiar with that process.
Enough said.
But as you can imagine, using that same type of technology, I can start to monitor patterns or behavior. I don't even need to see people's faces. I just need to look for patterns and behavior. And so one of the examples is in doing this pilot around loss prevention, we were monitoring the stockroom of a huge retailer. And we could see that if the items in the stockroom weren't being moved from the stockroom to the shelves, well, one, that's loss because I'm not able to sell those items. They're sitting in the back. Part of our pilot was great. It proved that. But here's what else it proved. If that was a repetitive pattern in that store, I could predict that you were about to have manager or store level employee turnover because they aren't happy and they're not moving the product from the back of the room or the back of the warehouse to the front shelves. So by completely, I hate to say randomness, we came across this data point of being able to help a massive scale retailer predict employee turnover and actually have managers step in and start to help improve that experience, whatever it was, leadership, management, frustration, lack of staffing, whatever it was, through computer vision and using some technologies that you wouldn't have anticipated. We didn't anticipate that we would come up with those findings. So all of David's stats and scoring methods are extremely relevant. But sometimes it's pattern recognition. Sometimes it's that example of computer vision that gives you insights into behaviors or predictive analytics in some cases of we're about to have an employee retention challenge.
Yeah, I feel our ability to gather and normalize all that data to then find unique patterns that can have demonstrable business results, I think is a huge area. Obviously, other people think that too. We've seen it happen.
The correlation piece is real key because even in those traditional kind of measurements around connectivity and other stuff, one of the things that we've been able to do with some other organizations as well is see that how, you might have a system-wide rollout of X, Y, and Z kind of technology update other areas, but there'll be correlation between that and certain areas or geographies that could dictate it's a connectivity issue in like a change in the cloud provider or something along those lines. Or even in communication, especially with internationals, where there wasn't the language normalization. So adoption and sentiment suffered and experience suffered in, an EU country or something else along those lines. Because it's not just that, they felt like a second class citizen associated to because they didn't even offer the training set in that portion of the organization. Additionally, we found stuff that, even communication management styles have been uncovered in some of these things. We'll see poor adoption, worse sentiment records, other things. And it points to issues with leadership or management, even, in a different regionalized than other areas. So it's amazing once you start to peel the onion back, like what Charlie was talking about with the computer vision, what else are we seeing here? Hey, we're looking at here and we're starting to pull in the HR KPIs around employee retention and other areas because that's something that we're tying into the employee experience metrics and other things. So once we started to pull that data in, now we can see where people are quitting or leaving, right?
Mm-hmm.
And why is there an outsized level of leading, like in Charlie's example, at store X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
What can we
it's one
tie
of
that
those
into?
leading indicators that could tell us in advance how to resolve the issue to someone's benefit, to all of our benefit, right? With the win-win of the happy employee, with a retentive employee. But you guys, so real quickly, I'm just going to have you guys speak to next steps, just in terms of, because I know you offer a number of different services, but just even regardless of whether someone is using worldwide technology to assist with kind of making those next steps or not, I really appreciate the context you guys have provided around this. But just a little quick hit from each, because we only got about a minute or two left. But Charlie, top of mind, what do you encourage people to do as they're figuring out what they could be doing to improve in this area?
Oh gosh, there's a lot of ways that we jump in and help. I mean, we have a whole experience design team at Worldwide that comes out and just observes process. We sit in sub-sandwich restaurants and watch people and traffic flows and patterns and look for friction points. And sometimes those friction points are better enabled through technology. And sometimes it's a sticky note or a sign that's needed to make things more clear for customers or for associates. So there's a ton of areas. But I think some of those experience design sessions that our teams do really lead to demonstrable results for customers.
Excellent. Thank you. Charlie, David, final word?
I agree with Charlie. Is understanding the workflows and the points of friction that your employees have is critical. And on top of that is you probably have a lot of this data, a lot of this information contained in different silos across the board, and really kind of getting a holistic look and taking a step back and going, what can we ingest? Where are the insights that we can garner already? What's the low-hanging fruit that we can do to improve that sense of experience? And have a level of transparency within your organization to let them know that you are making these changes, that you are focusing on this, because that's real critical as well, right? It can't all occur in a black box somewhere else that no one knows what's occurring.
Yeah, no, there's no one right answer, it seems, but there's a whole lot of good answers and a whole lot of bad answers, and in threading that needle and executing on this kind of stuff, this data could be used for good or evil, and it depends on the style of management and the goals of the company and such. But you guys have always given me so much to think about. And I appreciate you taking the time to help us explore priority one. Guys, enjoy the rest of your day. Appreciate you being on Tech 37.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, don't forget, employees are consumers too. They expect the same seamless digital experiences that they enjoy in their personal lives to extend into the workplace. It's all about balance and the alignment between business and IT. You don't have to go this alone. First, you could request a customized version of the 5 priorities report developed with your specific needs and outcomes reflected. Or you could participate in a digital workspace workshop and get direct expert guidance on these priorities tailored to your organization. Links to do that, as well as a lot more resources, including stuff to read, to listen, to watch, are going to be tagged in the below the video here. If 2022 was all about transitioning to a hybrid work style, 2023 is an opportunity for businesses to realize their full potential as excellent places to work. And this means that IT, HR, and as well as business leaders all need to stay in sync and put the people first by doubling down and giving their employees the best experience in the industry. This shift to an employee-first mindset enables organizations to meet the needs of the workforce as well as achieve breakthrough results. So don't miss out, and thank you for watching. Yeah.